Hi guys, today I'll be taking a look at a linear switch from Kailh, the Kailh BOX Red. Let's get started. Now, the Kailh BOX Red is part of the box lineup which consisted originally of 4 switches, 2 linears, 1 tactile and 1 clicky. Today I'll be focusing on this, the BOX Red, the lightest linear switch in the lineup. Now, before I move on, I already reviewed the BOX White, the clicky variant, which you can go ahead and watch if you haven't yet. That switch is much more interesting and I go a lot more into detail about the box design. Essentially, the short version of it is, this white plastic cover which houses the switch contacts is the box. It has nothing to do with the stem at all. However, all of that adds up to the switch having an IP56 rating, which is very impressive. Now, in terms of pricing, these go for around £5 for 10 switches, which is just above budget switch pricing, but below most mid-tier switches. And this is what they look like when disassembled. Feel free to pause the video. Now, let's move on to the switch categories. On-center key presses are decently smooth with only minor inconsistencies between the switches. Off-center key presses are just as inconsistent but are noticeably scratchy, especially when pressed slowly. Overall, compared to the original Kailh Red, they are a massive improvement, although they still aren't the absolute best out there, but it's good enough for most people, I think. 7 out of 10. Now, according to the manufacturer, these switches have an actuation force of 45 grams at 1.8mm and a total travel of 3.6mm. Now, in terms of the actual key feel, they are light across the entire press, which isn't to my taste. I would say they are equivalent to most Cherry MX Red clones or even the Cherry MX Red itself. However, unlike the original Kailh Red, this newer box switch feels much more consistent across my batch, weighting wise that is, which is a solid and much needed improvement. Overall, if you're into light switches like these, this may be a decent choice, but for me, it's on the light side. 5 out of 10. Now, I would describe sound as quite thin and clacky. You can tell this wasn't exactly made to stand out in the sound department. Additionally, the switch installed in my X key has a noticeable spring crunching noise. Take a listen. Now, a few of my other keys have this too, but they aren't as loud, thankfully. Overall, there's really not much to say here. 6 out of 10. Now, take a listen and enjoy. Now, in 2 words, too light. That's how I would describe these in a nutshell. These just aren't comfortable when I'm typing on them since I basically bottom out all the time, and the switch installed in my backspace key tends to bind just enough to sometimes be a nuisance when pressed off-center. However, I will say that the rest of the typing experience is a lot more consistent compared to the original Kailh Red switch. Overall, if you're on a tight budget and you like lighter switches, these may fit the bill, but I know for sure it's not for me. 5 out of 10. Now, I made a bunch of silly mistakes in all types of games with these, even more so in faster paced games where you really need to be in your element for the best performance. But with these switches, that was tough. The biggest downside to them is the weighting, and it didn't do me any favors. In fact, it induced errors in my gameplay. It was extremely frustrating to use these, especially during the early days of testing. However, its one saving grace was the consistent weighting, which is very useful when trying to get used to, well, any kind of switch. And that's the one thing I could not say about the original Kailh Reds. Again, I'm glad Kailh made these switches and improved on them because they do shine best when you put them under pressure. Overall, given the light weighting, gaming on these wasn't as bad as I first thought, although its consistent weighting was the real winner here. And if you're the type to play lots of games, I can recommend this as a budget alternative to more expensive linear switches. 7 out of 10. In conclusion, it's a decent switch on its own, and a pretty good alternative to more expensive options out there. The final score for this switch is 30 out of 50 or 60%, a massive improvement compared to the original Kailh Red. And that's the end of the review, and next time I'll be taking a look at another linear switch. Until then, take care and goodbye.